The crimes, the criminals, why did they do it? Who got hurt? Did they meet justice or commit the perfect crime? You'll find all the clues at Jim Harold's Crime Scene. Welcome to the Crime Scene. I am Jim Harold, and so glad to be with you once again. Today we're going to talk about Barbara O'Hare and some very disturbing allegations she has regarding her time at Aston Hall, a hospital in the UK. And these experiences, Barbara says, happened when she was a child, and they're most disturbing. Now, I can't independently verify everything that Barbara says, but my goodness, what a sad, sad report, and just very disturbing as a parent to hear these kind of things. And Barbara, we thank her for coming on the show and sharing her story, and here it is. Our guest today is Barbara O'Hare, and she has a very frightening story to tell when you think about people. The ones that are the most vulnerable are those of children. So anytime you hear of something being done of a terrible nature to children, it's doubly disturbing. And Barbara O'Hare is on the line on Skype, and she is going to tell us about the experiences she had when she was just 12 years old, when she was admitted to Aston Hall Mental Institution in Derbyshire, and that's in the UK, and the kind of things that went on at this facility, which is now closed. Her book on the subject is The Hospital: How I Survived the Secret Child Experiments at Aston Hall. Barbara O'Hare, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's nice to speak to you, Jim.
So let's start with the beginning, just so people can set the stage. What was your situation as a child, and why were you admitted to this facility? Kind of tell us about young Barbara and everything that led up to being put in Aston Hall.
Okay. I was the result of a broken marriage. My mother took off with my older sister and left me in the care of my father, who couldn't cope. So I ended up being knocked around from one foster parent to another, eventually ending up in children's homes. The reason I ended up in the children's home is because I was being severely abused by a foster mother, and social services were not doing their job, basically. So I was admitted at 12 years of age to a remand home, and I think you would call it like a juvenile hall in America. I was 12 years old, and actually I was too young to be admitted there. It turned out that there was a lady running the place, and she was singling out girls to be seen by Dr. Milner, who was a doctor who got me admitted to Aston Hall. The children were all getting channeled into this remand home and then shipped out to Aston Hall Hospital. I've got papers from the National Archives that will back up what I'm saying. So this teacher was actually singling out how many girls were going over to Dr. Milner.
Now, tell us about Aston Hall Hospital. Now, as I believe I said at the beginning, it was closed in 2004, but what was it?
It was a mental institution. Sometimes it's referred to as an adolescent unit. When I first met Dr. Milner at 12 years of age in the remand home, I was basically deceived into thinking I was going to a regular, everyday hospital. I didn't know I was going to a mental hospital. When he asked me, would you like to come to a hospital, I seen an escape route from the terrible regime that was happening in the remand home. And I just thought, oh, yeah, as any 12-year-old would think, anything to get me out of here. But I went from one hell to another hell.
Now, I want to be very precise about this. In terms of these accusations, other people have made similar accusations. Is that correct?
A lot of other people have come forward. And they've come forward to different agencies. Some have gone to the police, some have gone to the National Health Service, some have just gone to a solicitor. But then there's some that can't go anywhere because their husbands or their family don't know they was ever admitted to a mental institution, and it would have a very bad effect on their lives today. So Yeah, they're double victims, if you ask me.
And before we get into what was done, have there been any charges? Has there been any prosecution? Because just trying to establish if this is something that has been proven in a court of law or anything like that.
Well, basically, the police did release a statement a couple of weeks back saying that there would have been 58 charges had Dr. Milner been alive. They've also released a statement in the Derby Telegraph, which is just stating now that there was 10 other children's homes associated with this.
So talk to us about the abuse. What happened once you were admitted?
Well, it all started before I was actually admitted. On my first meeting with this Dr. Milner, it was very, very scary because he took hold of my hand and he was saying, "You bite your nails," but I never did bite my nails, ever. He said, "I think I'd like you to come to hospital. Would you like that?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he was rubbing my hand and he was saying, "Oh, you poor child. Oh, you poor child." But I was an innocent 12-year-old. I had no idea of where this was going, but it felt uncomfortable and strange. And he ordered that I take medication immediately from the first day while I was still in the remand home. And I was administered, I was given 2 tablets immediately to be taken 3 times a day. And that was the build-up to sending me to Aston Hall. When I arrived at Aston Hall, he wasn't the nice man that I'd met before. He kept his head down. He didn't even acknowledge me. He just put his head up and he said, no dinner for you, treatment. But I did not know what treatment was. I got a terrible shock.
Now,
later on,
go ahead.
Yeah, later on, and I was given some medication, and then later on, I was took up the stairs and placed in a very shallow bath, possibly with the amount of water you would put in for a young baby, and it was tepid. It was like barely any heat in it. And that has troubled me all my life to try to make sense of why would they put you in such a shallow bath. But now, I've realised why it was. And then I was weighed. And then they had this gown. It's hard to describe the gown, like a hospital gown, but it was very, very thick, like a canvas, very heavy. I would imagine it was adult size because it was extremely big on me. I was naked underneath. We wasn't allowed to wear any clothing at all underneath. And then taken into a room, which was more like a cell. It had a window, but it had shutters on the inside, wooden shutters. And the nurse closed them shutters so to block out light. I was told to lie down on the mattress. This mattress on the floor was just a basic rubber mattress, something like a dog bed really, but covered in rubber. And and maybe because of the drugs they gave me earlier, I don't know, I complied. Children comply with the authorities. And then she brought in a trolley with this needle on it. But before she done that, she brought the trolley in with the needle on, and on the top of it had the bandages. They wasn't new bandages, they were used bandages. And she started to tie my hands together, the right hand over the left hand, forming a cross in between the wrists. And it is a bit distressing to talk about, but then she told me to open and close my right hand while she rubbed up the inside of my forearm to bring the vein up in the elbow. She mixed some powder with some water and injected that straight into the vein. Immediately, I felt like a statue. It was like, maybe you could call it like a zombie, because my body was frozen. I couldn't move any part of my body. I don't even think I could feel my body, to be honest. But I was conscious. I could see, I could hear, but she basically turned me to stone. Not long later, the doctor came in. When the doctor came in, he had 3 black cushions. He was carrying 3 black cushions under his arm. These are the kind of cushions you would possibly see in a wheelchair, what people sit on. And he placed the 3 black cushions on the floor next to the mattress. And he lay down next to me. I didn't see the mask coming, never seen that mask coming, but suddenly there was a mask on my face and it had lint or cotton wool, I don't know what it was. And then suddenly something dripped onto my face. I didn't know what it was then, I know now it was ether. And I blacked out, completely blacked out. Very frightening.
Extremely frightening. Now, these kind of things, I can't, I don't see any, were these people just sadists?
Personally, well, he certainly wasn't fairies, was he? He certainly wasn't nice people. The nurse was evil. I don't know what they was, but what is really troubling to me today is there's so many links to what was known as MK Ultra. There's no evidence. I can't say, yes, that was definitely MK Ultra, but going through Mr. Google, our famous Mr. Google, I'm finding so much links to other psychiatrists who were linked to MK Ultra, and I'm finding this Dr. Milner's name on that list. He worked with William Sargent, well-known psychiatrist who had the zombie ward in London. He worked with McEwen, what was his name? I can't think of his name. He worked with McEwen. But the most troubling thing that I found is that on one list, I've actually got it in front of me, on one list, next to, I think I've sent you the list, it's got the Education Committee, and across from his name is the name M.J. Brooks. Well, Mrs. Brooks was the name of the lady who run the remand home. So if she's running a remand home and she's making sure we got shipped to Aston Hall, how come the same? I can't prove that's the same lady, but it's definitely the same name because I didn't know her Christian name anyway.
So do you do you theorize that this was perhaps just testing human limits? In other words, using poor children, using children under sad circumstances as guinea pigs to see what it would take to break them. And it was tied into some governmental program just to, again, just basically using you guys as guinea pigs.
Well, basically, yes, because I've also found evidence of other psychiatrists that was doing similar things in similar hospitals in the same state. I would call it state. In this country, we would call it county, but state, yeah? And I've also found evidence that they were allowing, especially on the boys' ward, boys to be used for experiments to look for extra chromosomes to see if they had a certain illness. In a 763 medical journal, which I've got a copy of, well, I've got the journal, but I've got the information, it states, thank you to the medical superintendent of Aston Hall Hospital for allowing me to examine your patients, and thank you to Sheffield University for funding this research.
So in your view, this was funded by some very powerful people, institutions, and it was just acknowledged. They kind of treated, it seems to me that if what you're saying is correct, that you were just treated like throwaway children.
I think to get into Aston Hall, you needed a certain criteria. And that one criteria was no parental support. Your parents wasn't interested. There was nobody going to listen to you. There was nobody going to help you. And I have a group on Facebook, as you know, where I've got survivors there, and it seems to fit the criteria of every single survivor that's in my group. And then it was sexual as well with the girls, well, in my own personal experience anyway. Every time I had treatment, I would bleed. But I was too young to have periods. I didn't understand. I wasn't like a 12-year-old of today who can tell you anything. I was a very naive 12-year-old, I was a tomboy.
So when you were when you had these treatments, you were anesthetized somehow and blacked out, and it would come to, and you'd be bleeding?
Yes. On the first occasion, I was admitted on, I think, the 18th of January, 1971. I would have been approximately 12 and a half years old. This is from my medical records. I've now discovered that I never came out of that treatment room for 4 days. And when I came out, I was bleeding.
Terrible. And, I mean, your experiences map to the experiences of other children, other women, or other girls at the same time?
Well, all of this came about because of a website of a guy, an urban photographer who takes photographs of, like, demolition buildings or old mental institutions. Right. All of this came about because I was doing research. It troubled me all my life, what happened. I told my doctors, I told everybody, but nobody believed me because there was nothing on my medical records whatsoever. As far as they were concerned, I'd never been in that hospital. But I eventually got some information. I got some proof. And that's why I asked the publishers, please put all of that in the book, put all my evidence in there, in my medical files. I'm free to do what I want with them. And it states very clearly, signed by the doctor, that he injected 12-year-old children with sodium amytal. I don't know if you know what sodium amytal is. But
it's like a truth. It's like a truth serum, isn't it?
It has 3 stages. It has stage 1, where it kind of like leaves you, well, it's supposed to leave you like hypnotic, in a hypnotic state, make you speak, make you talk about whatever. Okay? Stage 2 is basically an anesthetic, so they can operate on you with it. And stage 3 is death. So I can't understand. If you want me to talk, why are you putting a mask over my face and putting ether on it?
A good point.
And the other thing that troubles me very deeply about it, extremely deeply, is that every day this doctor did 2 children, 1 boy, 1 girl. So he would come to the girls' ward and do hers first, and then go to the boys' ward and do them. But he wasn't wearing a mask on his face, and he's the one administrating the ether.
And this doctor,
you see where I'm coming from?
Yeah. And this doctor has passed.
He's passed over, yep. I hope he rotted. And what happened was when I got my files, because of this urban website, another lady had left a comment on there to say of her treatment in Aston Hall. And for the first time in 46 years of me trying to make sense of it, I'd actually met somebody who had been there, who had suffered what I had suffered. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. And then the next day she told me that there was another lady, and these children are all separated all over the country, hundreds of miles from one another, that also stated she'd been there. And then that's when we all got our medical files. And that's when the truth came out. I got the medical files, and it was by an absolute fluke that I found out what sodium amytal was. It's one of the world's most dangerous drugs.
Now, how long do you think that this went on? I mean, obviously it probably went on before you got there, and I'm guessing after you left. How long do you think this went on, and how many children do you think were involved, possibly?
Okay. Well, he took over the hospital in 1947, and he died in 1975 or 6. I'm not too sure still. So what are we looking, 30-odd years? And 2 children a week. 2 children a day from Monday to Friday. Do the maths.
And has there been...
And also he run...
Go ahead. And
he run a clinic as well. He run a clinic as well in a hospital. One of the survivors tells me that he went to the clinic and he was euthanized in front while his parents were sitting outside. And his parents had no idea what the doctor had done to him. And that was because he was wet in the bed. Some children wet the bed, don't they, at 9 years of age? It's common. And then he admitted that child into Aston Hall. I can't remember how long he was in there. And trust me, my story is bad. But some of the stories I'm hearing, I count my blessings. I thank God that I haven't got the trauma that they've got because they've got a lot worse than me? Or is it that because when I was in there for them 4 days, drugged up, I just don't remember.
So, again, how long were you in Aston Hall altogether?
8 months.
8 months, my goodness.
8 months, yeah. 8 months of high security, locked in, day and night, in fear, in absolute fear. This doctor had previously worked in Broadmoor Hospital and Rampton Hospital, which are the top security hospitals in Britain. That's where the mass murderers and the bad people are really kept. And then he got a job working with children. Yet in all of his medical writings, he never, ever, ever speaks about giving children this treatment. He speaks about talking to them on their level, not having any paperwork, not making them feel guilty. He never speaks about what he was really doing.
Now, how long was this kept quiet? When did this start to come out? Because I know you're not the only one who has spoken out about this. When did this start to come out?
I'm the whistleblower.
You're the whistleblower.
I am. And I'm proud to say that I'm the whistleblower because you know what? All the suffering that all them other survivors have gone through. That doctor didn't do what he done to us just for 8 months. I've had flashbacks and nightmares and panic attacks. It affects you so bad.
Well, sure. PTSD, absolutely. Post-traumatic syndrome.
He also diagnosed every child that was in there as a mental defective, a backward child. Okay, he needed to do that. He had to diagnose us as that because that justified him putting us in the hospital. But we were just guinea pigs. That's all we was just guinea pigs.
And I guess if that's...
We wasn't even guinea pigs. We wasn't even classified as guinea pigs because on one of my files, I'm called patient 4.
Wow.
Well, don't you number sheep in a field?
Wow. Now, how long did it take for you to come out about this? Because I gotta think, you know, some people and probably many people, and many, as you were saying earlier, many people haven't spoken out to this day, probably. Part of you might say, is it even worth it to come out because I'm just going to get blowback and I'm going to get criticism and all of this. So how long did it take you to decide? When did you decide to expose this?
Well, I tried to expose it in 1995. I went back to the hospital in 1995. But the problem was the Freedom of Information Act never came in till 2000. Okay? And it wasn't a pleasant visit. One of the nurses was still there. I remember her very clearly. And I said something that wasn't so nice about Dr. Milner, and she jumped on me verbally. And it was as if I was a 12-year-old little girl again, and she thought she could treat me the way she did then. And she said, Dr. Milner was a pioneer in his field. Well, I felt my temper rise. And I walked over to her and said, a pioneer in exactly what? Because you was part of it, and you knew what he was doing to us kids. And the people who was with me basically got me away because I was ready to just explode. As I walked to the door, I'll never forget this, as I walked to the door to get out of there, there's a brick wall there. Sorry, not a brick wall, just a wall, a plastered wall. And I visualised myself, as I did when I was in that hospital, standing there, staring at that wall. That's what I did, so that the world couldn't touch me. The wall wasn't going to touch me. They literally done everything they could to break me. And as I went to walk through the door, the nurse shouted, she had to have the last word, shall we destroy your files? I looked back at her and I knew that she would have had great satisfaction doing that. And I said, no, do not destroy my files because I'm going to come back. And I promise you, when I come back, you're not going to like it. And I've come back and I've kept my bit of promise. And I haven't come back on my own. I brought the survivors of Aston Hall, and I want more and more to come forward. Anyone who was in there, come and get your justice, because what was, you know something, you couldn't treat an animal the way we were treated. And there's no crime in the world that would justify what happened to us. There's nothing. We couldn't have done anything that bad for the way we were treated.
No, it's absolutely horrible. How many people to date have come out and confirmed all of this and so forth?
The police have stated it was 105. It's 105.
Wow.
But I don't think it's 105 at all. I think it's a hell of a lot more. a real hell of a lot more. And the more the media are hearing about it, the more people are coming forward. It's like a never-ending investigation. But at some point, the truth has to come out. It has to.
Other than the nurses and things, do you think there's still people who don't want the truth to come out?
Oh, definitely. Oh, my God, definitely. 100%. I think that we were used for medical examination, experimentation and examination. And I think that the powers that be, whoever the powers that be, the listeners can make their mind up on that one. Don't want the truth out because it's still going on today. I believe it might be going on a different level, but it's still going on today. I believe that for a fact. You see, if you go to a psychiatrist or a psychiatrist comes to you, which I didn't want to see no psychiatrist, and my dad didn't even know I was in that hospital. He never signed it. This is another thing. Not one survivor has got consent forms from anyone to be given that drug. Not one. The only consent form that has come forward, one of the survivors has got a consent form where the parents signed for her to have a tooth took out. She was, I think, 14 at the time. Funny thing is, that tooth is still in her head, never got took out.
Wow. It's just incredible. I mean, it's just horrible, horrible, horrible. And, I mean, obviously, part of this has got to be cathartic to kind of finally say, hey, this horrible thing happened and everybody should know it. But do you have any other goal in doing this? Any larger goal?
Yes, I do. I think we're all too trusting with our kids. If you walk into a hospital anywhere, you're just saying, the guy says he's a doctor. You're going to say to him, here you go, here's my child. You're not going to quiz it. I think that doctors should carry their own portfolio. And if they're a good doctor, they'd be proud of their portfolio. If there's been any allegations of any description or any cause for concern, it should be in that portfolio. And a parent should have the right to see who is dealing with their child and what their expertise is. Because this doctor never had no training or expertise in what he'd done to us. He was a psychiatrist and a general practitioner. So where did he get the authority to give us anaesthetics and such heavy anaesthetics? Some of the children didn't get sodium amytal, you know. Some of them got a drug called Majulane. Apparently it's a form of LSD.
Oh, my goodness. Just horrible. Do you think that you kind of said you thought this went on in other places, but in terms of time, do you think this is a relic of the 1970s? Or do you think things still go on like this? Because I know you said you thought maybe people are too trusting with their kids. So you think this still goes on today?
Well, there was a big scandal a good few years ago called the Alder Hey scandal. And this was the scandal where a mother in Liverpool had discovered that her baby's organs, who'd passed away some years before, was getting kept in Alder Hey laboratories in jars. And yeah, that came out. If you Google Alder Hey Children's Hospital scandal, you'll see. So when the children had passed away, they were keeping all body parts and all different things. There was even children in freezers. So yeah, I do think it's still going on.
It's very, very disturbing. If people want to know more about the book, find out more about your story, where would you direct them?
Amazon. It's available in America now as well. Definitely Amazon. You know, I'm sorry if I get a bit emotional, but if you read some of the reviews that people have left there, they gave me the strength to keep going. I'm not going to back down. I'm going to fight for justice. I'm going to fight for the truth. And I don't care if it puts me in the grave, because it might put me in the grave, but I've got a lot of other survivors. They've got to fight after me. And that's how I feel. I feel so strongly about this. And then on the other side of the coin, I feel sorry for the doctor's family, because he's long dead and gone, and they've got to live with the embarrassment of it. And God loved them, you know. You shouldn't pay for the sins of your father. Yeah, you know, this doctor was highly... Do you know, he was even on the child protection list in Derbyshire. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, he was highly regarded. But nobody knew what he was really doing. And, you know, I'm going to say this straight. If you could see a picture of Aston Hall, it shows a beautiful big mansion. I mean, oh my God, absolutely beautiful. It was like he was on his own little island. He was the god of that little world. And he had all of us. He could pick any one of us any day he wanted. It's horrible. It is absolutely horrible. I don't know. I'm going to say what I think. I don't know if this was a paedophile ring and he was knocking us unconscious for the satisfaction of other paedophiles. Because once we found out some members of staff had actually spoke out for us on our behalf who worked there, who's still alive. Once he was given treatment, no staff and nobody was allowed anywhere near that room he had us in at all. And the layout of the building, he could have sneaked anybody in there at any time. Nobody would have done nothing about it. So was he knocking us unconscious? And then God knows who was coming in and doing whatever they wanted? Or was he knocking us unconscious? Well, I know that he definitely got sexual gratification from me because the flashbacks have told me that. Horrible. And I'm just hoping... I'm just hoping. I've had a couple of good days recently. It hasn't been so bad. I'm just hoping now talking about this just doesn't bring it back, because when I talk about it so openly and so blunt, I might get flashbacks for a while, and I don't really.
Sorry.
I cut myself off. No, it's okay. I need to do this. It's not for you to be sorry. I need to do this. I need people to please listen, take heed. A psychiatrist can do what they want, not like a regular doctor. MIR scans, blood tests, here's my evidence. Psychiatrist can say anything he wants and it goes by his word. And then he can do whatever he wants with you once he's got you. That's what happened to all his kids. There was the remand home was there was in the National Archives. That's the history of the remand home. In 1960, the governors of that remand home was not happy with Dr. Milner and asked for a child psychiatrist to be brought in. But still, that lady who run the place allowed Dr. Milner to come and take his pick of all the little, beautiful, innocent 12 and 13-year-old little girls he wanted.
Just horrible. The book is The Hospital, How I Survived the Secret Child Experiments at Aston Hall. Barbara O'Hare has been our guest. Barbara, I know it's difficult. Thank you, though, for sharing your story today.
And thank you for listening. God bless you, Jim.
Thank you for joining us today on The Crime Scene. A very disturbing episode, but I think these kind of things need to be brought out because, unfortunately, especially when it comes to children, there are people out there that do not have the best interests of children in mind, and this is certainly a cautionary tale, even though it happened decades ago. I would think that there is the possibility of such things happening in the present day. So be careful out there. We'll talk to you next time. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.